you. It's nice to be here. I will talk about passenger demand forecasts that we are doing at the International Transport Forum, which is the transport part of the OECD. We are a group of, we're a think tank. Basically, it means we employ researchers. We also organize the annual ministerial summit, and we work on different other transport-related things like ECMT system. In this presentation, as I said, I will be talking about passenger demand forecast, and I will show the expected impacts that we think the Rail Baltica could have on road, rail, and air travel. So, how do we do our forecasting? What do we take into account? So basically, we start with GDP growth forecast of the OECD. We take the population forecasts of the United Nations. We also take the network into account. So we basically collect all the network information that we put in the model. It includes road, rail, number of airports, all the interconnectivity that's been talked about today. All that goes into our model. We also have the car ownership projections, and we have these accessibility, like what population could be reached within 6 hours from the location of home or work. So let's look at the forecasts. And I'll just talk what they are. The way we work with, so we collect all this data that I mentioned. We collect from every country in the world, and we do the forecasting for time periods every 5 years. So you have the base year that we have. The first one is 2015, and for every country we do the forecasting, and then you see the results. Those are regional results. So like for example Europe and the United States and so on. So the numbers show totals, and they are billion of passenger kilometers. Our forecasts show a dynamic growth throughout the world, and they are determined by those economic characteristics, economic trends that we are observing. The demand is first modeled on the aggregate level, and then there's a split model that sort of explodes it into different types of demand. Let's zoom in. If we talk about the Baltics, and those are modeled here. The graphs, by the way, are not to scale. It's just you should look at the numbers. The Baltics forecasts are also in billion passenger kilometers. We see dynamic developments throughout those Baltic countries and Poland and Finland. In Poland, for example, we have 50%, well, more or less 50% growth until 2050. Finland and Estonia are basically doubling their growth doubling their passenger demand. Lithuania is tripling it. The most dynamic is Latvia, where we have basically 5-fold passenger demand increase. And we have the split per mode. As you see, we have rail, air, bus, and car travel over there. Well, these forecasts that I'm presenting now, they focus on passengers. We also have similar models that we model freight and emissions. So that's something that I'm not going to talk about today, but that's possible. So, I mentioned that slightly a bit already, but the way we do the forecasting is we have this demand generation submodel where that allows us to generate the total interurban mobility as a function of those socioeconomic variables that I just described a couple of slides back. And then once we have the totals for every country in the world, if we had the data, we could theoretically go to smaller regions. But this is done on national level. At the second stage where we have that, for every country we have these regressions, so basically formulas that describe that particular country within with all the influencing variables. And at the second stage we split it by mode, so we get passenger kilometers traveled for each of the modes in every country. Let's talk about the opportunities. To evaluate Rail Baltica, the way we see it, we would compare Rail Baltica corridor with other high-speed rail corridors, and based on the population distance between cities, journey times, and what do we see? What are the opportunities there? So if we look at the population, we've got Poland with 38 million inhabitants in 2016. And we've got the Baltics with roughly, 1.3, 2, and 2.89. And then we have an additional 5.5 million in Finland. And if you compare it to the Western Europe, you see sort of here the Western European figures, and you see that the population is relatively small. But if you look at the populated population size in the cities, they're actually very comparable with other high-speed lines that are served. So, like Turin is 800,000 inhabitants. Naples is practically the size of Riga. Lille is also a comparable size city. And then we thought, okay, yes, we of course know about this potential rail tunnel, which could additionally increase the passenger demand on this rail line. So if we look at the Rail Baltica line, and the Rail Baltica people will correct me, but just for the scale, it's approximately 1,000 kilometers of distance, but if you split, then you compare with very good, nice high-speed rail lines. So like Paris-Lille, where we have the TGV train, it's 333 kilometers, which is roughly Tallinn-Riga distance or Riga-Kaunas distance. And Madrid-Barcelona, 620 kilometers, is basically Riga-Warsaw distance. And Turin-Naples is the Tallinn-Warsaw distance, where high-speed trains are running. And why do I talk about these distances? Distances are important because of this, of the travel time. So here, from a very, very well-known report, we have this door-to-door travel time in hours, and And then we have this conventional rail, the green line. So if I'm traveling 100 kilometers per with conventional rail, it's the fastest. There's no other way. If we are above 150 kilometers, you take the high-speed rail, and above 800 kilometers, you have the air that you will choose based on time. And coincidentally, the distances of Tallinn to Riga is 300 kilometers, which is the sweet spot for high-speed rail. And Riga-Warsaw is also 621. And we're perfect with distances. We're perfect with application. And this calls for me to tell how I got here. My office is in Paris, and on Friday I had to be in Antwerp. And it's Paris to Antwerp is approximately 400 kilometers. And I could have taken different modes of transport, but what I did is I took the high-speed rail, which gets me, it's the fastest link. So I needed to fly from Brussels to Riga here. To get there from Antwerp, it's Antwerp to Brussels is 50 kilometers. So what did I do? I took the slow-speed rail. It's here. I did a perfect choice. Perfect choice, what a passenger does every day. And then I flew to Riga. Why did I fly? Because the air is the fastest mode. It's the best. It's the cheapest for that distance of 2,000 kilometers. This just shows how the choices are made. And now I'll continue with the impacts. The impacts that, well, the other speakers before me have done more detailed studies, but basically we see the mode shifts, the rerouting, and the induced demand. I'll mainly talk about the mode shifts and the rerouting because the induced demand comes from the economic growth that is induced, and then therefore there's a demand. So that's sort of a double loop, so it's hard to talk about that. So on the passenger market to Western Europe, we see a mode shift is likely to occur both from road. I mean that we're talking here about the total journey. So you're going to have, for parts of the journey, you have the mode shift from road and aviation, because it's going to be quicker. It just falls in that sweet spot of the graph. And on the competing routes, including rail, by the way, you will have this mode shift, or let's say even between rail, some passenger might choose a faster service. Of course, that's subject to economics, subject to the pricing being corresponding to the value of time of the passenger. So, talking about another thing, that we'll see the rerouting. Because the rail line, as we see it, is strategically placed to serve the airports in the Baltic countries. It basically creates opportunities to attract more customers, so the catchment area is sort of wider of the airport. You sort of get this pull to the hub airport. I'm not saying that there will be one hub airport. It just means that the niches will be pulled towards the airports, so each airport could specialize. They'll find their ways to find their perfect niches. So we see also that there's also potential for development of multimodal integration links. So, for example, we know of this Tallinn's tram to the airport. And that's very complementary. You have to, that the transition between modes needs to be nice and easy and effortless. And this is one of the things that could be done. It's an opportunity. Talking more about the opportunities, this extension of catchment areas that I mentioned, it basically concentrates the flows of passengers, and you know, if you think about an airport, just a simple, so there's a feeder airport, for example, and until a certain point in the traffic, so to get from point A to point C, you will be passing through a third airport. And this concentration and extension of catchment area of the airports by using rail will allow to establish more direct services from the regional hubs that we have here in the Baltic states. Of course, there will be increased competition for those airports that are providing the same service. And we also see, as a lot of speakers have mentioned today, there will be quite substantial labor market impact. Greater integration of labor markets that we foresee. A lot of people will be commuting between, maybe not daily commute, but maybe weekly commute. A programmer from Riga will go to Tallinn to work 3 days a week in Tallinn, his company, and then he'll come back to his family. It's a very enabling service. Some things that should be considered, and I'm sure it will be done in due time, is something that you should think about. You should think about the capacity allocation between freight and passenger. And of course, there's the issue of infrastructure cost allocation. How do you solve it? How do you make it affordable and competitive at the same time with the other modes, which are also subsidized in other ways, not through infrastructure. There are some operational issues that might be encountered, like different speeds of rolling stock when you have a freight train and you have the passenger train, and the freight train has a certain speed, and of course the passenger train goes at the limit of the track. That's something for solutions. So there are planning issues that if you go to one of these big rail rail centers in Europe, you see how difficult is it to do. Just one last thing. For all of this to work, it is for those mode shifts, for the routing, for the induced demand to occur, it's very, very, very crucial to have the economic rationale. You have to have that travel cost plus value of time plus everything effort involved equation. That has to be the best, and at that you can the Rail Baltica can be competitive. And the statements of the ministers today confirm that we can get out of that Nash equilibrium to a better state of welfare by agreeing amongst the Baltic countries. Thank you.